What is integrative medicine?
So, integrative medicine is probably the last incarnation of a long tradition that started with what they called alternative medicine and then got termed complementary. And eventually now it's being termed integrative medicine. And there are integrative medicine journals, integrative medicine textbooks, and this is the latest incarnation of what basically means a more comprehensive approach to how you approach healthcare.
Right. And so it's not just, I don't show up to you and just get a pill. It's more than that.
It's absolutely gigantically more than that. And if you want to look at it, it comes from the concept of holistic medicine that whether you spell it with an H or you spell it with a WH, it basically means that you're trying to be as comprehensive, as complete as you can in addressing the numerous aspects of human life and improve them to the best of your ability.
Yeah. And so this is one of the things, like for me, for the longest time, I just wanted to lose weight. That was it. I wasn't super focused on health at all. I just wanted weight loss.
Mhm.
And I would only ever address one thing. Usually it was, well, I'm going to address carbohydrates. I will pin the entirety of my weight on carbohydrates. And it never got me anywhere addressing one thing. I would spin my wheels. Maybe I'd lose a little bit of weight. And then that would give me the impetus to keep coming back to carbohydrates. When I gained the weight back, I'd remember, oh, that first week that I stopped eating carbohydrates, I lost 10 pounds. It must be that. And so I'd come back over and over and over again. But what you're talking about is, I think, what I eventually found, which is like all aspects of my life contribute to this condition. And if I don't address it in a larger way, I'm going to keep having problems with it.
Agreed.
So what is in a very broad sense, and I'm very much a person who is more interested in the individual than I am the group as a collective. But since we're talking to many people and we don't have their histories and we can't address them singularly and individually, what are some of the biggest areas that are contributing to ill health in America?
The number one is, I never said this word before, but I call it disnutrition or misnutrition or bad nutrition, whatever you want to call it. And that is the root of it all.
That's where the big problem is here.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I went to medical school like everybody else. The roots of our medicine, the way it's practiced now in the Western world, I come from Italy, I went to Padua, but wouldn't have mattered if you went to London or Paris or Berlin or Boston. It's the same thing. The current version has its roots into the Rockefeller Empire, which is another story. But that created this model of drug and surgery, and you intervene at the time which the disease is already there. We never had basically any teaching on in nutrition, and this is all stuff that you had, at least for my life, you had to develop all by yourself, practicing and taking care of actual human beings. For me, the watershed year was 2005, when two of my patients came in for a follow-up, a couple in their mid-50s, and I almost didn't even recognize them. And I said, "Who are you?" And they said, "We are such and such." And I said, "No, that's half of you. Where did you leave the other half?" And they said, "Well, we left it in Florida." And I said, "Well, tell me more." And so they went to this vegan residential, very strict program in which they did drinking fresh wheatgrass juice, and then had hydrocolon therapy, which at the time I didn't really understand what it would do. I do now. And I saw clinical outcomes that I could not have dreamed, that actually I was dreaming of all my life and I could never achieve. And then a month later, another couple comes, friends of theirs who did what they did. And the same thing happened, so I got on a plane, I got down there, and that changed my life forever. And I saw the difference with what it means to eat living foods, to human physiology. And so if you ask me, what was the thing that blew my mind completely, it's the realization that what we are seeing today has most powerful influence come from the quality of your food.
Oh, okay. Will you explain living foods to me?
Living foods would be, sunlight is the reason there is life on Earth. And so this has been going on for 4.5 billion years. And about 2 billion years, 2.5 billion years, plant life appeared here. And so what motors everything is the photons. Einstein proved that, photons turn into energy. And what happens is when you eat a raw vegetable, you're eating electricity. And we call that living, because the energy gets accumulated in their mitochondria, their chloroplasts. And then when we eat it, when they're still alive, meaning that, the plant is alive, and if you look at the microscope, the chlorophyll is moving and the chloroplasts are doing their thing. When you, human being or the rabbit or the mammal, when we ingest it that way, there is a transfer of energy from the chloroplast into our mitochondria, and our mitochondria are the powerhouse of, mammals, including us. And it becomes more and more important the older we get, because, there is a decline in energy production. And so when you ask yourself, where is it? That's what it is.
Living food. So it's the energy in the food.
It's the energy in the food, which not many people talk about, the actual electricity, because we are electrical beings. Without electricity, we're dead.
Yeah. I about that thing that animates the difference between living meat and dead meat really is some kind of an electrical spark, right? And think about that a lot in my own kind of quest to understand what the human spirit is. And, this idea that you cannot create or destroy, you can only change energy. And so wherever this energy is that's animating me, hopefully will go somewhere else. I mean, this is just a fascinating off-topic thing, but I like the idea of consuming more energy. That's a cool idea. My only experience with, I think what you're talking about, was a vegan restaurant in Los Angeles that my friends would go to that was purported to be raw, but they dehydrated an awful lot of stuff. So I don't think they ever got it past whatever temperature to still, I don't know. They called it seemed like some stuff was cooked, but they said nothing was cooked.
Well,
does that count in your book, or by dehydrating it, are you of that life force?
I think you're zapping it somewhat significant.
It seemed to me that they were cheating on the whole raw angle, to be honest with you.
See, we call it perishable because it dies. And so you have a window. You have a window of time in which you can get the energy transfer from a living being, which is a plant, to another living being, which is an animal. But if you wait too long, as you know, if you leave the fruit there and the vegetables there, and you go back a week later, they're dead. Everybody can see they're dead. Right? So you strike the iron while it's hot. In other words, it has to have the energy inside to be able to give it to you. It's like if you put a dead battery in a flashlight, then don't be surprised that you don't get anything out of it.
Right. So what's that window? I mean, is it just you tell by looking at it how it appears? Wilted lettuce is less superior.
Right. Yeah.
Fresh.
Wilted leather already tells you that, the energy inside that structure is going away. And this is where, you buy produce. It's got an expiration date in which they tell you, use by, that time. And the biggest you could ever have would be if you had it in your own garden and you walked out and you picked it up and put it on your table.
Right. Is the majority of what you eat now? Do you eat anything dead?
So when it was all said and done, when you go to a place like that, it's very regimented and it's very, the calories go down, and all that. So this is something not easily sustainable in real life. But, what I try to do with my patients and myself is I have this sort of 75, 80%, plant-based diet, and then 20% remaining can be dead, and that's more like animal protein and other things that you still get the energy, and actually, you're eating food that, see, the thing is that, do you know anything about the microbiome?
I mean, I know that there's more bacteria in our gut than, like if aliens came down here and looked at us and they only were looking at life forms, they would see the bacteria in our gut before they'd see us. Some crazy
Absolutely
thing like that.
It's about 10 to 1. the bacteria in the gut to the rest of the cells in the body. But what, it used to be called the flora, and then it got called the microbiome. And this is one of the areas that we study. It's really exploded in the last 10 years. And now it's pretty clear that the microbiome decides what's going to happen to you. Not your grandpa from the grave. It's the microbiome that decides if you're going to get cancer, strokes, heart attacks, inflammation, and Alzheimer's and whatever else. At that point, it's kind of good news, bad news, because, if you don't want to take responsibility for yourself, it's bad news. But if you want to take responsibility for yourself, then you say, how can I make a microbiome that makes me immortal, so to speak, or it makes me better than what I am now? And this is where the plant-based diet has become the best, has shined. Because when you eat the way nature is structured, when a mammal like us eats the vegetarian fiber, the breakdown of that, and it divides between soluble and insoluble, the breakdown of that selectively feeds the bacteria that give us life and they keep the immune system working for us, not against us. I've been doing this with my patients since 2005, and I'm never going to stop because the results are incredible.
Do you find people have a tough time moving on to a diet like this?
Yes. But you also have to remember, I have a sort of biased population because I would say at least 75, 80, maybe 70% of the patients come to me because they're problems. And happily, I have about a 30% of patients that come to me because they are well, but they want more.
Right.
They want health, they want more longevity, they want to be brighter, and all that, and we love that because now we have the tools to work with them.
So that's your thing to address is nutrition in your practice. That would be the first thing to address.
It's fundamental. I mean, changing the microbiome, I actually laugh myself and say, the first month is the gut month, because if you don't clean out the basement, the house is not going to get cleaned.
Right.
And, and if the basement on fire, the house is burning, and that's chronic inflammation.
Yeah. And okay, from my study deeply the microbiome, but every time I've asked medical doctors about it, they're like, we know something's happening. We don't know what. So how do we determine the good versus the bad? Or how do you know that, other than looking at ancillary health markers, that what is actually occurring is beneficial?
So, the two things we look at. Number one, genotype. This is what mama, and papa gave you. That's your deck of cards. And the phenotype is you today, how you played those cards. So suppose a person comes into me with, he's 250 pounds, he has diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, he's already had a heart attack, he's got arthritis, and let's leave it at that, at the common stuff. Now that phenotype, that version of that person, there's no there, then things need to change.
Right.
They usually come in with the drugs. They come in with the cholesterol medication, with the high blood pressure medication, which is all stuff that manages but never cures. So now we know where to start. We go straight to the diet and say, what are you eating? And most of the time, it's so-called SAD, the standard American diet, which is a disaster. And now there's more literature about it that you can shake your stick at. So then we meet people where they come in and we say, okay, what can you do? First of all, is education. Say, listen, your microbiome is your basement, and you set the basement on fire. And you're the house, you're burning your arteries, you're burning your joints, you're burning your brain, and that's why you're here. And it, otherwise you wouldn't have come here. And then you explain, and then you see where that person is at and which are the steps you need to take next. We have a lot of things we can do. We can do hormones, we can do intravenous, we can do all kinds of things. But changing the microbiome, it's probably the best return on investment that I've ever seen. The microbiome doesn't take long. Clearly, the younger you are, the faster it happens. But I see people with cancer that are in their 60s or 70s on chemo, and they still get better.
Right.
So the secret is, patience and saying, listen, can you go from this to this next couple? We just change that a little, and then as people start picking up speed, they move from having to believe to experience, and that changes the whole game.